Well, ladies and gentlemen, last night the United States conducted a very successful military operation against Iran, hitting three of their top nuclear sites, including the fortress of Fordo, which is located underneath a mountain. The U.S. used MOBs, and I believe Hegseth has said they used a total of 12 or 14, and so that would require around 6 B-2s. The United States was very stealth-like. The first person to alert anyone of these strikes was the President of the United States via Truth Social. It was not Iran. They did not even know they were hit until it was too late, until the B-2 bombers were out of their airspace. The United States used diversion tactics, including sending some of their bombers, making it publicly known they were going to go to Guam for a refueling. Then possibly people were thinking Diego Garcia, and then maybe hitting on Monday or Tuesday. And the United States did what was previously done by Israel about a week and a half ago or a week ago, where Trump said we're going to negotiate. Iran's defenses were down. Israel softens them up, their air defenses, and then the United States goes in for the kill shot. And I was just thinking I was losing some form of patriotism. You know, we hadn't done a bombing run in the name of Israel for a while, and so we just got the patriotism. Yeah, I'm being sarcastic, but, you know, in all seriousness, this is a big escalation by Trump, and what happens next is extremely important in terms of deciding how this is going to be handled. As far as we know, at least what Trump said, and you can see these are the impact craters at Fordo on where the MOBs made contact underground. As far as we know, these three facilities have been virtually completely destroyed. That was the report on Fordo. Whether or not that's totally accurate, we will see. It seemed like, they would be dumb if they didn't do this, but Iran, via other satellite imagery in the days leading up to the strikes last night, had a lot of transport vehicles outside Fordo, possibly trying to move things out of the area. We'll have to get an update on that. You had J.D. Vance today. By the way, there's another big report that came out yesterday on Vance that I didn't cover, saying maybe he was against these strikes. People saying, well, the story was planted just to give Vance cover if this doesn't work out in the Middle East. This is something that is, in one word, it's hazy. It's just hazy because it's a fog of war. We don't know exactly how Iran is going to respond. People immediately saying they're going to close the Strait of Hormuz. They cannot do that. They don't have the authority to because of the U.S. naval presence. But yes, they can sink ships there. They can disrupt travel, and they can significantly impact the price of oil, which could be a problem. Right now, I don't think that's going to happen because it would also impact one of their allies, China, pretty significantly because of the amount of oil that they import from Iran and from the Strait. And so I don't think they will do that. They've threatened to close it 14 times in the last 40 years, and they've never actually done it. And they can't really do it. They can't just announce it's closed. So it's important to keep that into account. If it somehow did get closed or if it got disrupted to where it was a standstill, we would likely see the crude oil go to $120, $130, which for reference is what it was around during the initial first 3-4 month phase of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And that would have a big domestic impact on our economy. As it pertains to these strikes by Trump, they were very successful. Trump has said that Iran's nuclear program is virtually completely dismantled. There's always chances they've got other bases, other enrichment sites. Maybe they moved some of it out. A little bit hazy in terms of it being completely destroyed. But at this point, Trump does the B-2 bombers and he does the entire operation. And then he says in a tweet that he wants peace with Iran. And the United States has been reported their bases in Iraq have been put on high alert to be ready. And it's also been reported that the response by Iran may be targeting the U.S. bases in Iraq in terms of retaliation. You do also have the concern of some type of sleeper cell being activated in the United States domestically, some type of domestic attack. Iran does not have the capability to come anywhere close to the United States with a missile. They cannot reach the United States. And so people keep worrying about that. That's not something. It would be a domestic attack by Iranian nationals already in the United States. That's probably how that would be done. And so that's another thing people are worried about, of course, when you've got something like this in terms of, for Iran, pretty catastrophic. You're trying to de-arm them in terms of having any type of uranium enrichment. And so this is a huge step by Trump. And it's like, I want to say a lot of stuff here, but I did want a nuclear deal. 100%. I wanted a nuclear deal, and I would have given Iran 3.7% enrichment, whatever. You could say that's naive. You can say it's dumb. Right now, we're at a point to where if we can somehow, I mean, we'll see what the retaliation by Iran is. We know in the past Iran has notably been very light on retaliation, but they've been big on words. They're big on words, they're light on actions. And so if this is another one of those situations, there's potentially an opening to not have this as a prolonged situation. The problem is Israel. Israel wants a regime change. What does that entail? What does it look like? How much destabilization has to happen? Do the citizens, even though it's been said for many, many years, they very much dislike the regime? Will Israel go to take out Khamenei now? Because apparently a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, they supposedly could. Trump said, no, we're going to give it one more last chance at diplomacy. Don't take him out. And we know with the initial attacks by Israel, in terms of how precise they were into apartment buildings targeting nuclear scientists, they very likely could take out a significant portion of the regime's government, including their officials. And that's a question we have to ask ourselves in terms of, does this become more of Israel's fight now if they want the regime change? The United States has said they don't want it. Vance said something today that was a little bit concerning about it taking maybe multiple years to fully de-arm them in terms of nuclear capability. What does that mean exactly? Well, we know, and Rubio said this earlier today, he said, and Trump has been saying this, they immediately say they want no retaliation because they know this is the administration. If a U.S. base gets hit, that was because the administration decided to do this action, and that would be the administration's fault to a degree. Now you can say, well, making Iran completely immobile in terms of nuclear capability is more important than, you know, the U.S. base is getting bombed because long term it's better for them not to have a nuclear weapon. Imagine they develop one. The issue is, and we're eventually probably going to get something, who knows, at some point, you know, just in terms of how this is set up and the way Trump has spoke within the last 2 or 3 weeks, I can't pinpoint exactly what happened, but it does seem like something happened behind the scenes with this entire situation that really turned Trump. And I know the talking point out of the administration, because this has been leaked, and what they were telling to say, you know, have Republican people say, was that, well, Trump has felt this way since 2011. But why is there such this huge emphasis? It's like Trump is trying to convince his base and the American people that it is so important that even though my director of national intelligence, and we can talk that, because I think that's even a bigger troubling thing. Like when you put all of this together, it's so, you know, you've got Tulsi Gabbard saying they're at 60% enrichment. There's a number of different factors that have to be put into place when it comes to having a nuclear capable weapon. Iran is not weaponizing their enrichment. Now, you could say the 60% enrichment is a threat enough alone, and the 60% enrichment in part is because the Obama deal got ripped up, although we likely know that Iran was already violating the 3.67% enrichment policy just in different places where they weren't disclosing. But the point is, when Tulsi Gabbard came out and said that, the process was not in place, it was not happening, and then Trump over the past week says, no, she's lying. And then she's forced to kind of retract her statement and say, well, yeah, because they've got the enrichment and they're using the enrichment as the fear-mongering tactic to Iran possibly having a nuclear bomb, when there are so many factors, the tests, the miniaturization of it to actually create one. It's very concerning the way that they created this weird psyop within a week of just this tunnel vision. It's this crisis that immediately needs to be dealt with. We can't wait another day. They can't have a nuclear weapon. Well, what Trump is really saying is they cannot have any uranium enrichment. That's what he's saying. There's a difference between having uranium enrichment and having a nuclear weapon. Now, you can say because the regime is untrustworthy, them having any enrichment allows them the opportunity to have a nuclear weapon, but it is more nuanced than just saying they can't have a nuclear weapon. Well, under the Obama deal, they were not permitted to have a nuclear weapon either. They were at 3.67% enrichment. To have a nuclear weapon, you need to get to 90%. But I understand Trump saying any enrichment is too much. It's too big of a risk. When it comes to what happens after this, we have to, the best case scenario is a light Iran response. Oil will likely start trading $85-90 a barrel. They don't close the strait. They can't. They honestly cannot close the strait because of U.S. naval presence. But if they start disrupting it, it's going to have a bigger impact on oil. There's a light reaction, a light response from Russia and China. Russia's already preoccupied with Ukraine. Maybe they start getting more zealous in terms of possibly taking more land. By the way, Russia still does not have full control of the four oblasts that they want to take. People have to understand that. They don't have the full land territory of those four oblasts. That was in the Trump peace deal, the 7-point peace deal, to give them that. They don't even have full control of it. I'm not trying to, but the point is Russia has their own stuff. And Russia already offered to help Iran in a defensive capacity. Iran declined it. You've got China, who's going to be impacted if what happens with the price of oil. They've been very coy. They've been very light. They're going to denounce it. They're going to say it's illegal. Now you've got all these liberals coming out saying Trump needs to be impeached. What Trump did in this strike, this is within the Constitution. This is executive authority. It's a national security matter. And there's authority in terms of striking. And Rubio says it's not war. These are strikes. They're targeted. And we can read into that what we want. And we can say when you do something like this and you escalate to this point, you're automatically de facto at war. The U.S. and the administration doesn't want to make it seem like that and use that verbiage because it's a major turnoff. Trump did run on no new wars. And so to have this happen 4 or 5 months into the administration, there's a concern level, and it's not even just the concern level on how long does this last. It's a domestic issue in terms of the economy situation in which we had great cooperation from energy prices that helped the United States have low inflation. We couldn't even get a rate cut out of that, believe it or not, which is just insane. But now we're looking at, a bit of fog of war. We don't know exactly what's going to happen next. Is there going to be a true, legitimate retaliation strike on the United States at some of their military bases? If that happens, Trump has threatened severe escalation against Iran. And he's doing that because he knows he's put this out there. And if there's a retaliation, you could blame the administration for the lives lost. Because, and some people would say, the Zionists will say, well, it's worth it because they couldn't have a nuclear bomb. Well, the problem with that is we have our own intelligence. Mossad, they're Israel. We have our own. Our own intelligence said they weren't actively weaponizing and developing a nuclear bomb. You can say, well, Israel said they're closer to Iran and they know and they have higher level intelligence. And there's stuff that we don't know about. There's other sites. I mean, if there's other sites, that's going to be a problem because Trump has said their nuclear program has been virtually obliterated. And maybe it has. We just don't know. We don't know what Iran has. We don't know how many things they moved out of Fordo and the other nuclear sites that were targeted. But this was a very impressive operation. The first report we got on this was when the B-2 bombers were out of Iran airspace, and it was Donald Trump breaking the news, not Iran, because they didn't know what hit them. And that's what you're going to get with the U.S. government, and it's very impressive. So what we want is some form of weak response from Iran. They're saying the proxies have been woken. The Houthis have vowed to start. I mean, we had a ceasefire with them. They're going to start potentially sinking ships again, or at least trying. They've been weakened to a degree. You've got Hezbollah that potentially has also been weakened, and this is really why Israel knew it was the perfect time, because the proxies were weaker, because Iran was politically isolated to a degree, even though technically they still have Russia and China. It's not to the level I'm sure they would like. They're not going to commit, either of those countries are not going to commit to Iran in a war against Israel and the United States. It's just not going to happen. And so the hope is that there's a weak response, and people have said it, it's kind of a tagline, we're in and we're out. And so that would be the hope. And you could say, well, that's cope. Well, I mean, you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how long this is going to happen. We don't know what's going on with the regime in Iran. Do you know the exact number of missiles they have? People have been saying they've been running out of missiles. I've also heard some things about Israel possibly running out of missiles in terms of their defense of the Iron Dome. This is the thing, you get conflicting reports. The point of it is we want this, and Rubio said today in a statement, this is a quick operation. It is not war. You can say, well, they're downplaying it because Trump said no new wars. I understand, but still. The point is, we don't know the response. We have to see what the response is from Iran. We're going to try and stabilize things. The other thing that we don't know is, with Israel, they want the regime change. What does that entail? How long does that take? What does that mean for the United States? Right now, Trump has said he does not want the regime change, or he said that's not the United States goal. The United States has communicated the goal was to make sure they didn't have a nuclear program anymore. My concern is that we're going to enter this weird stage to where, all right, we've destroyed some of their biggest nuclear facilities, but we don't know. They might have other facilities, and you get more involved, and Iran becomes more destabilized, and a regime change may end up happening in some... we just have to see what Trump ends up saying about this, because people are thinking, well, Trump's just going to bend the knee to Israel on the regime change as well. And you can say, well, the citizens there want it, but we've tried that in other places in the Middle East and spent a bunch of money, and normally it tends to create a power vacuum. I guess you could say, well, Syria's working out. Well, it's been, how long has it been there? Give it some more time. You're going to destabilize Iran, and when you've got a population of 90 million... You know what? I don't know. Maybe tell Ted Cruz, 90 million, but I think Tucker Carlson said it was 92 million, to be fair. So I didn't know. But no, it's just, there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of things at play, and there's going to be a lot of animosity against the United States, even if the regime is hated for this action. And we wanted less of this Middle Eastern action. Preferably in terms of something like this, if I have someone within my cabinet that, number one, was hard to even get in, with the liberals saying, no, don't do it. Tulsi Gabbard saying that, no, they're not developing. This is fear-mongering by Israel. And I'm Trump. I say, hey, Mossad, if you have other information, that's great. You're going to have to collaborate that with us. And if you want to do something, you're very close to Iran. That's your decision. We're not involved. The problem with even doing that is the United States is always going to be involved because of how much money we give Israel. So even that's kind of like a fool's errand, although you could make the argument that would be better than this, because technically we were still keeping the facade. And I saw a lot of people report saying we just entered the war last night. I thought we had entered it a while ago, because we were helping Israel. And I know it's like entering to a lower degree. We were helping Israel shoot down Iranian missiles. But they had a clean slate to where they had not entered the war. The media had said that, because they had said last night the U.S. enters now. So I thought we had already entered. But, obviously this is an escalation. It's an escalation. It's an offensive. It's the first offensive. And I know that the administration was also saying, well, and Charlie Kirk said this. He said they do not want the United States to go offensive against Iran. And I think Kirk was mainly, to be fair to him, was mainly talking about some type of military operation involving boots on the ground or a regime change. But the problem is now the goalposts are just going to keep moving, very likely until Israel gets what they want. I'll just be honest. There's nothing else I can really say. I don't know. So this is just how we're seeing it. And I don't think it's good. I think, but I'm just reporting on it. So, yeah, this is what we hope, that we need limited response from Iran. And hopefully, because they're so politically isolated, that's what ends up happening. But I did want to go to some of this stuff. See, the thing is, I have this stuff teed up, and then I just end up just talking, because I'd rather talk. But they're talking about closing the strait. Their parliament has approved a plan to close the strait. They cannot literally close the strait. They don't have that much power over it, but they can make a lot of people's lives hell in terms of disrupting the strait and the oil flow. And it's going to affect, we can estimate, you can look at certain things, $120 a barrel, $110 a barrel, $130 a barrel. If it gets anywhere close to that for any amount of prolonged time, we are going to see a domestic impact on the U.S. economy. And so you want to talk about a real, especially after everything we had done the past few months, to have something like this happen and just this is going to affect it. Listen, we may only go to $80 or $90 per barrel. That's my prediction. That's my prediction because I don't think they're going to close it. They can't close it, but they can make it hard. They can make it hard. You've got Pete Hegseth talking about this is a midnight hammer has obliterated Iran's nuclear ambitions. So they used 14 MOPs. Wow. To strike the key nuclear strike, to strike the key nuclear sites. Hegseth said the operation did not target troops or civilians. And, so we'll see how this, there was talks about them because there were some scientists within Fordo that were Russian and Putin was assured they were going to be safe. So we'll have to see. And there was a report that they evacuated right beforehand and they had known. I mean, people say that the site had been evacuated for weeks because they knew the U.S. was going to strike it. So we think that the casualties would be very limited then, and this was just to strictly get rid of as many. I mean, the concern is that they did have, via satellite imagery, vehicles potentially moving stuff out, and you would imagine they would. I mean, it was pretty much obvious after the Israel strikes that there was going to be a secondary U.S. attack against the facilities, and everyone was talking about Fordo. And some of their biggest facilities were going to get hit, and so they're going to try and move as much as possible, and you're going to try to limit the casualties as much as possible if you are Iran. But can Iran really respond to this in any meaningful way that would cause an escalation from the United States? We really right now don't think so. They could decide to strike, U.S. bases in Iraq. What would that do? Maybe, is there any casualties, or do they just strike and try and damage equipment? That's all going to have to be, we're going to have to see what happens, basically. And so that's really what I can say in terms of that. But if there's a light response, we would love to say that opens a door in terms of negotiations. But if Trump means they need to dismantle their entire nuclear program, where are the other nuclear sites? And is Iran willing to go that far? Where is their military's health? Would their regime feel threatened enough to potentially agree to some type of deal with the United States after this escalation? We don't know. There's a lot of unknown. The likeliness is probably pretty low, but it depends where their current military's health is at this point. If they're in a desperate state, if they know Israel is obsessed with regime change, they could say, all right, we'll give in, we'll do some type of deal. And Trump has demanded unconditional surrender. And so the tactical nuke was not used, just like we thought it was the MOBs. And so I'm sure Trump is potentially threatening stuff. Of course, he doesn't want any retaliation against U.S. troops. That would be on him. And he knows that, and he thinks, well, the risk is willing to take because he didn't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. But even the premise of them having a nuclear weapon seems to be drum up from Israel as a fear-mongering campaign. Similar things we saw back in 2001, 2003 to get us involved in the Middle East in a meaningful way after 9/11. And so that's really the concern. And we'll see what ends up happening with this. But we're gonna avoid a long-term campaign in the Middle East. I'll tell you that. People can say, well, you're coping. Trump understands it. Rubio understands it. Vance understands it. Another thing with Vance, it came out yesterday that Vance was against these strikes. There was leaked signal messages back in March. Oh, by the way, Hegseth has gotten praised for this. No leaks, nothing. It's gotten so bad with Democrats and the TDS. They cannot tell Democrats, even ones with the clearance to know, that they are doing certain military operations. Because the problem is, if they tell them, the Democrats will leak them. And then they'll say, oh, it's Hegseth. And so they can't tell them. And people they're outraged over this. It's a security concern. You can't tell these people. These people have such bad TDS. If they catch wind of it, they will leak it to someone. It'll be anonymous. And then they'll say, well, look at Hegseth. So you just can't tell any of these Democrats at all. They're not trustworthy. They have TDS. They would rather something happen to Trump. And especially some of them that are against it. I mean, it's just there's no point in telling them. They shouldn't tell them anything. Do not tell them anything. Because they put U.S., you're going to put... it's going to be a very dangerous thing. Democrats start leaking more stuff. So just keep them out. And people get angry about that. It is what it is. I mean, but the point is with this one, there were no leaks. Very good job by Hegseth. There's been other reports behind the scenes talking about Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard being sidelined. I don't know if those are true, at least for this operation. And then we also have, I mean, I'm sure Rubio played a big part, but the thing is with Vance, it came out yesterday in a report. Vance was against these strikes. Remember back in March in the signal leaks, he was against the strikes on the Houthis. People now immediately say, well, that's planted. That's not true. He's just doing this to run cover for his 2028 campaign. And no, I mean, these are high level. They're verified. This is real. There's collaborating reports saying, yes, Vance is against this. Vance was looking very stern and very sour in the background of Trump's speech. This is not an infight thing between Trump and Vance. Trump knows, or Vance knows, that Trump is the top and the leader, and he has to be followed. His instructions have to be followed. So that's why Vance is doing it, but Vance has been against this. I'm just saying for the record, and people say, no, this is just because 2028. No, it's not. These are expert reports. They verified it. So when you have stuff like that, I mean, it is true that Vance was against this. So that's something to take into account when it comes to 2028. And I just wanted to throw that out there. But the point is with this, this was an operation that was very successful. And the hope now is that, listen, I don't like involvement in the Middle East. I would have, if I was Trump, the thing is even in the premise of ripping up the original nuclear deal, if I'm Trump, I'm trying to get a slightly better deal than Obama. I'm bragging about it and I'm getting out. That's it. I'm not doing this. Just because there's a certain amount of fogginess in terms of the response and our role in the region going forward, because you would imagine there's going to be retaliation. You would imagine the proxies are going to hate the United States even more. You would imagine there'd be a bunch of cells that get awake because of this. So where does that leave us? What does that look like exactly? Maybe there's a very tame, light response by Iran. There's been talks of them possibly trying to tattle on the United States, saying it's illegal, going to the UN, saying they're going to sue us. I mean, this is all very good because it means their response is probably going to be pretty weak. Now, we don't know that, but if that's really what the route they're going, we'll have to see. Remember, it took them many hours to respond to the Israel strikes, the Israeli hits, and then they launched hypersonic missiles. They're not going to be able to reach the United States, but they will be able to reach the military bases. And so we'll have to see in terms of that. You don't want to say this but this is how war is, I'll be honest. Israel is probably hoping Iran escalates this significantly by hitting U.S. bases. It is what it is. And then the United States would have to respond, and then that gets maybe a regime change if the U.S. responds in a huge way. We would like to avoid that, but we'll have to see. Either way, guys, make sure you like the video down below. Also follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.